Hey guys, Zomfox here, and the first week of UFL action for the 2025 season is over, meaning it is time to look back at this week and do our first week review of the season. Of course, we look over each game just to give a brief overview of what happened, who was good, who was bad, how the teams do, as well as look at the attendance and TV ratings for the week. And week one was a very, let's just say, negative week overall. You'll see in the tier list for the opening week games, which is more than likely coming out tomorrow on the 2nd, maybe the 3rd, probably tomorrow. The games themselves weren't great. You only had two that were actually solid, and even then, only one of them was like a really good game. And the attendance TV ratings, you probably know by now, but before we get into that, let's get into the overall games, with the first one being the opening game between the Battlehawks and the Roughnecks, and man, this was a bad one. Houston looked even worse than we expected. Remember how last year I made the joke multiple times about how Jarrett Garantano had like negative hype and somehow couldn't even meet that expectation? The whole entire Roughnecks team did that. Everybody viewed them as one of the two, or most people viewed them as the worst team in the league, and they laid the biggest egg ever. Manny Wilkins played an incredible game, but it's to the point where very few people actually think he played well because the Roughnecks were so bad and looked so bad that people think Manny just didn't do anything. I stand by that Manny actually looked a lot better than he did last year, but I do also agree that he looked as good as he did, partially because the Roughnecks defense was pitiful. The entire Roughnecks team basically did nothing. As you can see, Nolan Henderson was inaccurate as hell, but he still was much better than Anthony Brown. Anthony Brown was a terrible quarterback in this game. The Roughnecks had almost 300 less yards than the St. Louis Battlehawks did. It was bad. I mean, it wasn't even like they were doing horde on third down. The third down battle, Houston did enough. They were almost 50%, but the Battlehawks were at 75%. They were just destroying them then. Time possession, they had 10 more minutes. It was bad. Manny Wilkins was the best of the three quarterbacks that played. Jacob Saylors just was dominating. Ja'Cour Pearson looks like he's back in Sea Dragons form. He was incredible. And Hakeem Butler didn't even do anything. Hakeem Butler, as I joked in the Power Rankings, just ran cardio, and they still won. They didn't even need the reigning Offensive Player of the Year to do anything, and they still crushed Houston. Awful game, awful opener, especially in Houston. Now, the second game was the Renegades Brahmas. This was a much better game, but I'm only saying that in like the very first 5 minutes. This was also another bad game. Let's call it like it is. This was the sloppiest overall football. For how bad the offenses looked in the DC Birmingham game we'll get to, this was a very sloppy game. Both teams had a lot of penalties, 11 penalties for each team. A lot of weird ones, but overall the Renegades were just a far better team. Again, Luis Perez was the best quarterback on the field. Kellen Mond, he wasn't nearly as bad as Anthony Brown, but let's put it this way. If we didn't watch Anthony Brown and Nolan Henderson, we would have looked at Kellen Mond saying he had the worst QB performance of the week. But because of what happened the day before, we kind of viewed him and Alex Magoo as not having it as bad because we saw even worse by Houston. San Antonio just, my God. I mean, Arlington's defense, with the only argument being Memphis's defense, those are the two most improved units in the entire league. And I mean that even considering how good DC's D-line played. As an overall unit, Arlington and Memphis's defenses looked much better this year in week one than they did at any point last season. Again, Anthony McFarland had one long rush, but John Lovett did nothing on the ground, and the other two rushes McFarland had were nothing. It was just really good play by the Renegades. Aside from the couple of bigger runs they led, they basically completely stopped them on the ground. I mean, remember, they had 50 yards between their two longest rushes. You eliminate those two rushes, oh my God. As for the Renegades, Kalen Ballage ended up just torching the record. The record was set the day before in St. Louis, with St. Louis, and then Ballage just hit a 77-yarder to break that record for the longest rushing touchdown in league history. And again, Day-Day Hunter didn't play all that great either, and that's the thing. The Renegades' ground game really wasn't that good, and they still did what they did. Davion Smith, however, he was at the goal line 3 times, and 3 times he ran in for a touchdown. This was just a great performance by Arlington. Again, another not great game, but Arlington, their O-line looks much better, just a much improved team. Is the reason why everybody pretty much agrees they're the best team in the league right now. Now, the game of the week was the Michigan-Memphis game. This is one of those where I feel like a lot of people who don't understand the Showboats viewed this as a worse game than it was. The Showboats were obviously the most improved team in an overall aspect, mainly because their team was just so much worse than everyone else besides Houston last year. Memphis' defense looked really good. This was definitely the best game of the week. This wasn't just truly sloppy play like the DC Birmingham game. This was just good football for the most part. The only questionable thing was the quarterback decisions. Now, Danny Etling getting as many snaps as he did in this game, It's a matter of what's the true reason. Is the true reason to try and keep the defense honest? Is the true reason to just keep Bryce Perkins, fresh for whenever he is in? Because Bryce Perkins was the best quarterback of the week by far. I mean, he was the best QB of the week, and part of that is because he was able to just keep being fresh. He's able to come in, do those big rushes, hurdles, the insane rush he had at the goal line. Do a lot of stuff like that. I mean, he ended up having, 2 total touchdowns, was very accurate, over 80%, had a 120 pass rating. That was the best of the week. T. Will and E.J. Perry both gave us one really, really good drive. T. Will's first drive and E.J. Perry's last drive were both two. You could easily argue those were the 2 best drives of the entire week, especially the E.J. Perry one. Those are just great football. But then, weird decision making. T. Will would have a great drive, and they put in E.J. Perry. E.J. Perry had the great drive, and they put in T. Will. Ken Wisenhunt is back, by the way, in case you didn't see the community post. And I know, yes, I'm not even joking. Ken Wisenhunt is back as the head coach of the Showboats, so whatever went on with him, he is back. So hopefully the offense looks better. But even then, with how they played, this offense already looked much better than last year, and the defense was much better as well. Again, B.T. Potter missed a couple kicks, one at the end of the half, one late in the game. That kind of helped Memphis stay in it. And the final score is deceiving. The final score was really 20-12, because not the last, but essentially the last play of the game was a pick six. So eliminate the pick six, it was 20-12. This was the best game of the week. This was the only game that I would say is truly a great game this week, and is one that would be fun to rewatch. The other ones, not as much. That was this one. Then DC Birmingham. This was the hardest watch, honestly, in terms of a just football perspective. Both offenses looked rough. There was a couple, and when I say a couple, I mean 2 good plays by DC's offense. DC's ground game essentially did nothing. Abram Smith looked, again, his first game back in over a year, so I'm not going to be too hard on him, but that looked really bad. Deion Jackson didn't look much better. Jordan Ta'amu did not look good. He was very overrated this week because a lot of people are saying that he's a top 3 quarterback because of what he did. Inaccurate as hell, made a lot of throws. I don't know if I said it on Twitter. I think I said it on Twitter. If Matt Corral had started or come in at half for Magoo on either team, either A, the Stallions win, or DC wins by 15. Corral was the best quarterback on the field, and he was, past the out-of-bounds markers on the field. You know what I mean? If he was playing instead of Ta'amu, the defenders win by over 10. If he came in at half for Magoo, they win a close one. Because Corral's just better at throwing the ball away. Because Magoo made a lot of bad choices. Let's just get this out of the way. Birmingham's O-line looked terrible. DC's D-line looked really good. But Magoo just did not throw the ball away. He played 2023 championship game T-Will, where he would just hold onto the ball way too long and would just refuse to throw it away. Skip was really pissed about it. So hopefully he gets it under control again. It's also his first game at QB in a while, so you got to give him some leeway there, but he looked really bad. This was the worst the Stallions have ever looked. Even when you look at their other losses, including the couple of upsets they had against the Gamblers back, in 2022 and 2023, they never looked this bad. The last time we saw them look even close to this was, coincidentally enough, against DC last year in that rain game in Birmingham, the birth of the Shirtless Pyramid, but they still won that game. This was very similar to it. Again, DC's offense did not play that well. They basically had to rely on Matt McCrane kicking a bunch of field goals because the offense couldn't do enough. The 9 sacks really helped them again. It made it to where the Stallions only had 16 total passing yards. This was a rough watch. This was still the second best game of the week because it was close. But overall, this is one of those games where I feel like neither team really looked good. Michigan-Memphis made both teams look better than this one did. Because again, DC's D-line, you can't take anything away from them. They looked incredible. Even if Corral was in there the whole game, they still get 4 sacks. But this wasn't like Memphis, where Memphis clearly looked really good. This was one where it was both teams are very questionable. DC's, it's going to be interesting. I said it before, the upcoming matchup against the DC Defenders and the Memphis Showboats is the best game this week. If you could only watch one game, that's the one you should watch. Because we're going to see truly which team, either one, both, or neither of them, are actually good. Because there's an argument to be made that the Showboats were the best team that lost this week. And we'll know for sure this upcoming week. Again, be on the lookout for the game picks on Friday for that one, but that should be game of the week. Now, the attendance. Yes, looks bad, but note, this is actually pretty good when you compare the TV ratings, which we'll get to later. As for the attendance, again, obviously you have one glaring number, and that's the 4,300 for Memphis. That's the worst in this entire ultramodern era, not counting the USFL in 2022 and 2023, and of course, their non-hub games. Or their hub games. Man, that was bad. Memphis last year averaged just under 7K. Now, a lot of that was that they had an opening game that wasn't super pitiful, but man, this is a terrible number, especially considering that of all the teams, they did a lot to try and get Memphis. Again, they still didn't try that much, but they tried the most in Memphis with, like, especially the month heading into the season. Really bad to see that. Arlington's number, I said it before, if they can keep that number and even improve, that's a really solid start. Again, last year they had 14K, but their attendance dropped drastically. If you eliminate that 14K number, their attendance plummets on average. Whereas this time, if the Renegades can keep this up, because again, they won this week, or they won this past weekend, and they're getting another home game against another Texas team, this time the Roughnecks. So you would imagine that they might see some improvement, which if they do, that's a really good sign for the Arlington market. That last year was just due to the team, being a 3-7 team. As for DC, again, it's a low number for DC, but still going to be one of the best numbers we see in the league. Getting that win is huge, also going to help their attendance grow. Again, winning is the best way to improve your attendance in football, especially in this league. The more you win, the better it is, again, unless you're Birmingham apparently, but still, really solid to see from DC. As for Houston, it is a weird one. This is the only one where I would say there is some legit excuse for it. Like, the Memphis, there's no excuse. That's a pitiful number. DC, you would want that to be better. There's no real excuse. But Houston, there actually is. For those of you who don't know, up until, and I'm not even joking, about 4 hours before kickoff for 2 weeks, it was supposed to be thunderstorms during this game, meaning that it was going to be delayed. And then it just so happened that, Houston was still playing in the men's tournament, and they had a game that night. It also so happened that the Astros home opener was that night. So you had a really, really stiff competition, whether it be on TV or, going to a game. So the Roughnecks definitely really sucked. Again, terrible scheduling move by the UFL. Again, continuing that tradition of spring football leagues not scheduling games well. But overall for attendance, I would say Arlington, solid. DC, good enough. Memphis, horrid. Houston, understandable, but it's going to be very important to see what happens next time, especially since they look even worse than last year. You hate to say it, but they're probably going to drop in attendance next time, but we'll see. TV ratings, this is where it gets bad. Now, when you look at them and you compare them to last year, you see why these are so bad. Last year, their opening was the exact same. 2 games on Fox, 2 on ESPN. Yes, they were different days, a couple of them, blah, blah, blah. Point is, 2 on ESPN, 2 on Fox. The ESPN games averaged over 800,000. Neither game hit that. The highest was the Michigan-Memphis at 569, which was by far the best number of the week. Considering that was on ESPN and it was just, during the early day, that was the best game of the week TV ratings-wise. The Birmingham-DC game, you would have hoped that had been higher considering all the things, but again, more March Madness games, blah, blah, really bad number, under 400,000. San Antonio versus Arlington, again, really disappointing number. Fox last year had over 1 million on both their opening games. Neither game hit that. Again, neither game really was great. The only one was that you had the St. Louis versus Houston game, which was pretty close to one of the games on ESPN last year. But even that one, the peak viewership was like 800,000 something, and then the last hour and a half plummeted in ratings because the game just, was a total blowout at that point. Really bad. There's no sugarcoating this one. Everybody pretty much agrees the same thing. It's going to be very interesting to see what next week's numbers are, because off the top of my head, there's one game that's competing against the Final Four, and the other ones shouldn't really be competing with anything that's, that big. All these opening days for MLB should be over by then. You're not going to have, again, like the Astros home opener being the same exact time as the Roughnecks home opener. So it's going to be very interesting to see, because again, Friday Night Football needs to average over 1 million viewers. I've said that and I stand by it. It needs to. So hopefully this one is better, especially because this is a marquee matchup. It's the Michigan Panthers versus the Birmingham Stallions in Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. So that is a very big matchup for the league to have. So hopefully that ends up being an over 1 million game, because if it's not, then it's truly time to worry. Is truly time to worry. If that does not hit 1 million, or at bare minimum like 900,000, that's really bad. Then other games, again, big issue. I know it's technically not their home opener because it's technically a Brahmas home game, but the Battlehawks play in the Battle Dome this weekend, and it just so happens to be on FS1, which is, of course, one of your 2 really weak networks. Again, the Battlehawks getting screwed over the first few weeks of the season. That is another yearly tradition of spring football, right? You had it, where they had the 4 straight road games once. Now you have it where they start the season on the road in the first game, and then they play their home game at home because it's technically Brahma's game, but in the Battle Dome on FS1. You love to see that, don't you? Isn't that just great? But aside from that, definitely bad ratings. These are really bad. Like, you can't sugarcoat it. As an opening week, this was the weakest opening week in this era, ultramodern era, of course. USFL, both years, XFL, both years UFL. This was the worst. And I'm not just saying that from an attendance TV rating standpoint, I'm saying from a game standpoint as well. Really weak games. The 2022 USFL also had, of course, the really bad Bandits Maulers game. But at least that one, you had one of the 5 greatest ultramodern spring football games with that General Stallion season opener. This week's best game was a spoiler to my tier list. A lower ranking A tier game was their best. So, not great, especially because last year we did have an S tier game with the Defenders versus the Brahmas. I remember that one was also an S tier. That was lower S tier than, of course, the Stallions Generals, but still an S tier game. This week didn't have that. So, attendance wasn't great. In fact, it was overall, I think a lot of people are kind of over judging it because of the Memphis number. Across the 4 teams, mediocre is the best way to put it, because you had 2 numbers that were okay, and then you had 2 numbers that were not okay at all. You know what I mean? But TV ratings, that's where it was really bad this week, and that's where you want it to be really good. So, yeah, that'll do it. This has been ZomFox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the bell. Overall, quick thoughts. They need to go back to the USFL ticket prices. The fact that they are trying to do these XFL and even higher than XFL ticket prices makes no sense. If you're not getting people in the gate, just lower the tickets. Again, I know some people said just have them be free. I disagree with that. But just make them cheaper. Like, the cheapest tickets should be like $10, not like $25. It's one thought. TV ratings, again, we need to see them improve, but we'll see. But overall, again, this is pretty much it. So, next video will be the opening week tier list. Again, this is the 4th video, if I remember correctly, I'm doing of this. But of course, this dates back to the 2022 USFL. So we're going to be adding the 4 opening week games to that tier list. Look out for my game picks video on Friday. Think about becoming a community member down in the description below, or just click the join button for 99 cents a month. You get exclusive team emojis. You get an exclusive video every month that's not about the UFL. You get other community posts that are exclusive to you. And if you want to become a community hero for $2.99, you also get to vote on one of the 2 games we live stream every weekend. With this one, looks like it's going to be the Brahmas versus, or it's going to be the Renegades versus the Roughnecks, I should say, on Sunday. So be looking for all that. And as always, guys, have a great night.